Elena Vasquez sat in her office on Earth, watching the morning sun rise over the Pacific Ocean. The view from the 42nd floor of the Human Diplomatic Center never got old. She had been Earth's top diplomat for 5 years now, handling talks with alien species across the galaxy. Today started like any other day, until her assistant Mark rushed into her office. "Ambassador, we have an emergency message from the Galactic Council," Mark said, his face pale. He held a datapad that was blinking red. Elena looked up from her coffee. "What kind of emergency?" Mark handed her the pad. "They want you at Nexus Station immediately. They're calling it a high tribunal." Elena read the message on the screen. The words were formal and cold. The Galactic Council demanded that humanity appear before them within 7 Earth days. They listed charges against humanity: aggressive expansion, dangerous technology development, and spreading harmful ideas to other species. "A high tribunal," Elena said quietly. "When was the last time they called one of those?" 200 years ago, Mark replied. "They used it to stop the Vorthon Empire from conquering half the galaxy." Elena set down her coffee cup. The Galactic Council was made up of 14 different alien species. They had ruled space for thousands of years. The Council decided which species could expand, what technology was safe, and how civilizations should behave. Humanity had joined the galactic community only 150 years ago, making them the newest members. The message continued with details about the charges. Humans had built colonies on 47 worlds since joining the galaxy. The Council said this was too fast, too aggressive. They complained that human technology changed things too quickly. Worst of all, they claimed that humans were teaching dangerous ideas about freedom and self-government to younger alien species. "What's the penalty if they find us guilty?" Elena asked. Mark's voice was barely a whisper. "Complete cessation of expansion. Technology oversight by Council inspectors. And if we refuse..." He paused. "War." Elena stood up and walked to the window. Below, the city buzzed with normal life. People went to work. Children played in parks, and traffic moved through the streets. None of them knew that their entire way of life might be about to end. "Book me passage on the fastest ship to Nexus Station," Elena said. "And send word to President Chen. Tell her I'll handle this." 3 days later, Elena's ship approached Nexus Station. The massive space structure was bigger than most moons. It served as the headquarters for the Galactic Council and neutral ground for diplomatic meetings. But as Elena looked out the ship's window, she saw something that made her stomach tighten. Warships surrounded the station. Thousands of them. Ships from every council member species formed a deadly ring around the diplomatic center. The sleek silver vessels of the Zephyrian Empire. The massive, spike-covered battleships of the Krell hegemony. The crystal formations that served as Vorthak warcraft. Even the peaceful Delphinians had sent their bioships. "I've never seen anything like this," said Captain Torres, Elena's pilot. "They've brought enough firepower to destroy a solar system." Elena studied the alien fleet. Each ship represented a species that had ruled space for centuries or millennia. The Zephyrians had controlled their part of the galaxy for almost 4,000 years. The Krell had been fighting and conquering for over 2,000 years. Compared to them, humanity was still a baby learning to walk. "Ambassador," Captain Torres said nervously, "maybe we should turn around. Send a message saying you're sick or something." Elena picked up her simple black briefcase. Inside were her notes, a few data pads, and a paper notebook. She preferred writing things down by hand, an old human habit that many aliens found strange. "No," Elena said calmly. "If they wanted to destroy humanity, they wouldn't need a trial. This is about something else." Her assistant on the ship, a young man named David, handed her a report. "I've been studying the charges, Ambassador. The numbers don't make sense." Elena took the report and read it quickly. David had done good work, comparing human expansion to the historical expansion of Council species. The math was interesting. "Ambassador," David said, "I think they're scared." "Scared of what?" Elena asked. "Of us?" Elena smiled slightly. She had been thinking the same thing. But she needed to be careful. Fear could make even peaceful species do terrible things. The ship docked at Nexus Station without incident. Elena walked through the corridors with her small human delegation. The station was enormous, with different sections designed for different alien species. Some areas had thick atmospheres for gas-breathing aliens. Others were filled with water for aquatic species. The human section was simple and clean, with normal air and gravity. As they walked, Elena noticed something. Alien diplomats and workers stopped to stare at her. Some whispered to each other in languages she didn't understand. Others simply watched with suspicious eyes. Word had spread quickly that the human ambassador was here for a high tribunal. "They're all watching us," David whispered. "Let them watch," Elena replied. "We have nothing to hide." Elena's rooms at the station were comfortable but simple. She had a bedroom, a small office, and a meeting room. The furniture was designed for humans, though it looked strange next to the flowing curves and odd angles of alien architecture. That evening, Elena sat in her office reviewing files. She studied the history of every council member species, their expansion patterns, their technologies, their governments. She read about past tribunals and how they ended. Most species that faced the council either submitted completely or were destroyed. A message arrived on her datapad. It was from High Arbiter Xylex of the Zephyrian Empire. The message was formal and cold, just like all Zephyrian communication. It informed her that the tribunal would begin in the morning. Elena was to appear alone before the full council to answer the charges against humanity. Elena leaned back in her chair and thought about her species. Humans had been in space for less than 1,000 years. They had only discovered faster-than-light travel 300 years ago. When they first met alien civilizations, humans were shocked to learn that most species took thousands of years to develop what humans had achieved in centuries. But that rapid development was exactly what worried the council. Change scared them. Progress threatened the old ways, and humans represented change and progress more than any species they had ever encountered. Elena picked up her paper notebook and wrote a few lines. Tomorrow she would stand before the most powerful beings in the galaxy. They would threaten her species with extinction if humans didn't submit to their control. The smart thing would be to apologize and agree to their demands. But Elena wasn't planning to do the smart thing. She was planning to do the human thing. She closed the notebook and went to bed. Outside her window, the alien warships continued their silent patrol around the station. Each ship carried enough weapons to destroy entire planets. Together, they represented the combined military might of 14 species that had ruled the galaxy for millennia. In the morning, Elena would face them all. And she wasn't even nervous. After all, they wouldn't have called a tribunal if they were confident they could simply destroy humanity. They needed something from her. They needed her to submit willingly, to make humanity accept their authority without a fight. Elena smiled in the darkness. That was their first mistake. They assumed humans would react like other species. They assumed humans would be reasonable. They were about to learn how wrong they were. The Galactic Council chamber was enormous. Elena had seen pictures, but standing in the real thing took her breath away. The room was shaped like a giant bowl, with seats rising up in circles around a small platform in the center. Each level of seats was designed for a different alien species. Elena walked to the center platform wearing her simple black suit. Her shoes clicked on the polished stone floor. The sound echoed in the massive space, making her footsteps seem loud in the silence. She carried only her briefcase and notebook. Around her, representatives from 14 species watched from their seats. The chamber could hold thousands, but today only the most important aliens were present. Elena counted about 200 beings, all staring down at her. At the highest level sat High Arbiter Xylex of the Zephyrian Empire. The Zephyrians looked like tall, thin humans made of blue crystal. Xylex was ancient, even by Zephyrian standards. His crystal body glowed with soft blue light, and his voice could be heard clearly throughout the chamber without any technology. "The High Tribunal will now begin," Xylex announced. His voice was cold and formal. "The defendant will state her name and position for the record. Ambassador Elena Vasquez, representing humanity and the government of Earth," Elena said clearly. "The charges against humanity are serious," Xylex continued. "This tribunal will determine if your species has violated the fundamental laws that govern galactic civilization." Elena looked around the chamber. She recognized most of the species from her diplomatic training. The Krell War Prime sat with his massive armored body barely fitting in his oversized chair. The Krell looked like giant insects crossed with tanks, all sharp edges and thick armor. War Prime Krex had personally led the conquest of 30 star systems. The Vorthak representatives sat in a section filled with glowing crystals. The Vorthak were made of living crystal, like the Zephyrians, but where Zephyrians were blue and cold, the Vorthak were rainbow-colored and warm. They spoke with musical voices that sounded like wind chimes. The Delphinian ambassador floated in a tank of water. Delphinians looked like dolphins crossed with octopi, with smooth skin and tentacles instead of arms. They were known as the most peaceful species in the galaxy, which made their presence at this trial especially significant. Other species filled the remaining seats. The gas-breathing Nexarians floated in their atmospheric bubbles. The insect-like chitin collective representatives clicked and buzzed to each other. The plant-based Verdanian delegate swayed gently, its leaves rustling with each movement. The first charge, High Arbiter Xylex began, is aggressive expansion in violation of the Galactic Expansion Accords. Since joining galactic civilization 150 years ago, humanity has established 47 colonial worlds. This rate of expansion exceeds acceptable parameters by a factor of 3. Elena listened carefully, taking notes in her paper notebook. Several alien representatives shifted in their seats when they saw her writing by hand. Most galactic species had abandoned physical writing thousands of years ago. War Prime Krek stood up, his massive form casting a shadow across part of the chamber. When Krell spoke, it sounded like rocks grinding together. The human expansion is not just too fast, he declared. It is too successful. Humans have built thriving colonies on worlds where better species have failed. A murmur went through the chamber. Elena looked up from her notes, interested. This was the first hint of what was really bothering the council. The Vorthok representative spoke next, her voice like beautiful music. Humanity has established colonies on worlds that this council designated as uninhabitable. This violates the natural order of galactic development. Elena wrote down the phrase natural order and underlined it twice. The second charge, High Arbiter Xylex continued, is dangerous technological development. Humanity has developed terraforming technology that can alter planetary environments at an unprecedented rate. This technology has not been approved by the Council Science Division. The Delphinian ambassador spoke from his water tank, his words translated by a mechanical device. Human terraforming changes planets too quickly. It disrupts natural evolution. It makes worlds suitable for human life, when they should remain as nature intended. Elena noticed that the Delphinians' definition of nature seemed to be whatever existed before humans arrived. She made another note. Furthermore, a Nexarian representative added, its voice coming from speakers around its gas bubble. Human technology advances without proper oversight. Humans develop new devices, new methods, new ideas, without waiting for council approval. This is dangerous and irresponsible. Elena looked around the chamber. Every species here had taken thousands of years to develop their current level of technology. They had slow, careful processes for testing and approving new ideas. The thought of humans developing new technology in decades instead of centuries clearly frightened them. The third and most serious charge, High Arbiter Xylex announced, is the corruption of younger species with dangerous ideologies. This brought angry sounds from several representatives. War Prime Krek slammed his armored fist on his chair's armrest, cracking the stone. Humans spread poison ideas, Krex growled. They teach client species to question authority. They promote individual rights over social order. They encourage rebellion against proper government. The Chitin collective representative buzzed angrily. 3 client species under our protection have requested independence since human contact. This is not coincidence. This is corruption. Elena looked up sharply. 3 species had requested independence? That was news to her. Her government hadn't been informed of any independence movements among council client species. A Verdanian delegate swayed forward, its voice like rustling leaves. Humans teach dangerous concepts, democracy, individual freedom, self-determination. These ideas destroy social harmony. They make young species believe they can govern themselves. Elena almost smiled at that. The idea that species might be able to govern themselves was considered dangerous by the Council. That told her a lot about how the galactic government actually worked. These charges are not mere violations of law, High Arbiter Xylex said. They represent a threat to the stability of galactic civilization itself. Humanity's actions undermine the natural order that has maintained peace for millennia. Elena finished writing and looked up. The chamber was silent, waiting for her response. 200 of the galaxy's most powerful beings stared down at her, expecting her to beg for mercy or rage against the charges. Instead, Elena stood calmly and closed her notebook. She looked around the chamber, making eye contact with as many representatives as possible. Her expression was completely calm, almost bored. "High Arbiter Xylex," Elena said, her voice carrying clearly through the vast space. "Before I respond to these charges, may I ask the Council a few questions?" The request caught everyone off guard. In thousands of years of tribunals, no defendant had ever asked to question the Council. High Arbiter Xylex's crystal form flickered with surprise. "This is highly irregular," Xylex said after a long pause. "So is calling a high tribunal against a species for being successful," Elena replied calmly. Another murmur went through the chamber. Several representatives looked shocked that Elena had spoken so directly to the High Arbiter. War Prime Krek stood up again, his armor clanking. "You will answer the charges, human?" "You will not question this, Council." Elena looked at the massive Krell warrior without any sign of fear. "I will answer the charges," she said. "But first, I'd like to understand exactly what humanity is being accused of." "May I ask my questions, High Arbiter?" Xylex was quiet for a long moment. Elena could see him thinking, trying to decide how to handle this unexpected situation. Finally, his crystal form brightened slightly. "You may ask your questions," Xylex said, "but do not test this Council's patience." Elena smiled slightly. It wasn't a friendly smile. It was the smile of someone who had been waiting for this moment. "Thank you, High Arbiter," Elena said. "My first question is simple. In the history of the Galactic Council, how many species have been charged with expanding too successfully?" The chamber fell completely silent. Elena's question hung in the air like a challenge. She had just suggested that humanity's real crime wasn't breaking the law, but being too good at following it. High Arbiter Xylex's crystal form flickered again. Around the chamber, representatives shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Elena opened her notebook again and prepared to write down their answers. She had their attention now. And she was just getting started. High Arbiter Xylex looked down at Elena for a long moment. His crystal body pulsed with blue light as he considered her question. Around the chamber, representatives whispered to each other in a dozen different languages. Elena's simple question had clearly disturbed them. "No species has been charged with expanding too successfully," Xylex finally admitted. "But that is not the charge against humanity, isn't it?" Elena asked calmly. She opened her notebook and read from her notes. War Prime Krek said human expansion is too successful. The Vorthak representative said humans have colonized worlds where better species have failed. These sound like complaints about success, not violations of law. War Prime Krek stood up, his armor clanking loudly. "You twist our words, human." "I'm simply repeating them," Elena replied. She looked around the chamber. "Which brings me to my second question. Has humanity violated any specific expansion limits set by the Council?" This question brought more uncomfortable silence. Elena waited patiently, her pen ready to write down the answer. A Nexarian representative spoke first, its voice coming through speakers around its gas bubble. "The expansion accords limit the rate of colonial development. To how many colonies per standard galactic year?" Elena interrupted. The Nexarian was quiet for a moment. "The accords do not specify exact numbers. So there is no specific limit that humanity has exceeded. The rate of expansion must be reasonable," High Arbiter Xylex said stiffly. Elena made a note. "And who decides what is reasonable?" "The Council makes such determinations based on established precedent," Xylex replied. "I see," Elena said. "So humanity is being charged with violating a law that has no specific numbers, based on a standard that the Council defines however it wants." She looked up from her notebook. "May I ask what precedent is being used to judge human expansion?" High Arbiter Xylex's crystal form flickered with annoyance. "The historical expansion patterns of Council member species." Elena smiled. This was exactly where she wanted the conversation to go. "That's very helpful, High Arbiter. I've actually studied those historical patterns quite carefully." She reached into her briefcase and pulled out a small device. Several alien representatives flinched when they saw it, as if Elena had drawn a weapon. The device was just a simple human holographic projector, but to aliens used to complex technology, its simplicity was somehow threatening. "May I share some of that historical data with the Council?" Elena asked. War Prime Krek slammed his fist down again. "We did not come here to be lectured by a human. You came here to judge humanity based on historical precedent," Elena replied calmly. I think it's only fair that we all understand what that precedent actually is. High Arbiter Xylex was quiet for several seconds. Elena could see him thinking, trying to find a way to refuse her request without looking unreasonable. Finally, he spoke. You may present your data. Briefly. Elena activated the projector. A holographic display appeared above her head, showing a timeline with different colored lines. Each line represented a different alien species and their expansion over time. This shows the colonial expansion of all current Council member species during their first 200 years of faster-than-light travel, Elena explained. The blue line is the Zephyrian Empire. The red line is the Krell hegemony. The green line is the Vorthak Collective. She pointed to different parts of the timeline. During their first 150 years of FTL travel, the Zephyrians established 73 colonies. The Krell established 91. The Vorthak established 64. Elena paused and looked around the chamber. Humanity has established 47 colonies in 150 years of FTL travel. We are expanding slower than any council member species did during their early period. The chamber erupted in angry voices. Representatives shouted in multiple languages, arguing with each other and protesting Elena's data. War Prime Krex roared something in the Krell language that sounded very unpleasant. High Arbiter Xylex called for order, his voice booming through the chamber. Slowly the noise died down. Your data is misleading, Xylex said coldly. It does not account for the total time since first contact with galactic civilization. Elena nodded. You're absolutely right, High Arbiter. Let me adjust the comparison. The holographic display changed, showing a new timeline. This shows expansion during the first 150 years after joining galactic civilization, not after developing FTL travel. She pointed to the new data. The Zephyrians established 41 colonies in their first 150 years as council members. The Krell established 53. The Vorthak established 38. Elena looked up at the council. Humanity has established 47 colonies in 150 years as galactic citizens. We're still within the normal range, but your expansion targets the wrong worlds, protested a Delphinian representative. You build colonies on planets that should remain uninhabited. Which brings me to my third question, Elena said. She changed the holographic display to show a galactic map. What defines an uninhabitable world? The map showed human colonies as blue dots scattered across space. Elena noticed that many council representatives were staring at the map with obvious discomfort. According to council records, Elena continued, an uninhabitable world is one that cannot support the life of any council member species without major technological assistance. She highlighted several blue dots. These are all worlds that council species attempted to colonize and abandoned as hopeless. War Prime Krex stood up again. Those worlds are death traps. My people lost thousands of soldiers trying to establish bases on Kepler 442b. The radiation alone kills most species in hours. Yet humanity has a thriving colony there with over 2 million inhabitants. Elena replied calmly. That's impossible, shouted a Vorthak representative. Is it? Elena asked. Or is it just improbable? She looked around the chamber. Which brings me to my most important question. Is humanity being charged with crimes or with being different? The chamber fell silent again. Elena's question cut to the heart of the matter, and everyone knew it. Human expansion isn't faster than yours was, Elena continued. Human technology development isn't actually dangerous to other species. Human ideas about freedom and self-government aren't forced on anyone. She paused. But humanity is succeeding where you failed. Humanity is thriving in places you fear to go, and that makes you uncomfortable. High Arbiter Xylex's crystal form was pulsing rapidly now, a sign of agitation in Zephyrians. Your implications are insulting to this council. My implications are questions, Elena corrected. And I noticed that no one has answered them. She turned off the holographic projector and put it back in her briefcase. I have one final question for the council, and I think it's the most important one. Elena looked around the chamber, making eye contact with as many representatives as possible. When she spoke, her voice was clear and calm. If humanity were exactly like every other council species, if we expanded to the same types of worlds, developed technology at the same slow pace and never questioned the way things have always been done, would we be here today? The silence that followed was deafening. Elena had just asked the council to admit that humanity's only real crime was being successful in ways that made other species uncomfortable. War Prime Krex was the first to break the silence. Your questions prove nothing, human. You still face the charges of this council. Yes, I do, Elena agreed. And I'm ready to answer those charges. But first, I want everyone in this chamber to understand what this trial is really about. She closed her notebook and looked up at High Arbiter Xylex. This isn't about law. It isn't about galactic stability. It isn't about protecting younger species from dangerous ideas. Elena's voice remained calm, but there was steel underneath it now. This is about fear. You're afraid that if other species see what humans can accomplish, they'll start to wonder why they need the council at all. The chamber erupted in angry shouts again, but Elena wasn't finished. You're afraid that if humans can turn death worlds into garden worlds, other species will ask why you told them it was impossible. You're afraid that if humans can develop new technology in decades instead of centuries, other species will question why progress has to be so slow. High Arbiter Xylex was standing now, his crystal form blazing with blue light. Enough! You will answer the charges against humanity. Elena picked up her briefcase and notebook. Very well, High Arbiter. I'm ready to give you humanity's answer. She looked around the chamber one more time. 200 of the galaxy's most powerful beings stared down at her, angry and uncomfortable and afraid. Elena had spent her questions exposing the truth behind their charges, and now they wanted her to submit to their authority. They were about to be very disappointed. Elena stood calmly in the center of the great chamber. Around her, 200 alien representatives waited for her response to the charges. The anger in the room was almost physical, like heat waves rising from hot pavement. She had spent her questions making the council uncomfortable, and now they wanted their authority restored. High Arbiter Xylex, Elena began, her voice clear and steady. You've asked humanity to answer charges of aggressive expansion, dangerous technology development, and corrupting younger species with harmful ideas. She paused and looked around the chamber. Humanity's answer is simple, not guilty. War Prime Krex roared in anger. You deny the evidence? You deny your expansion? You deny your crimes? I deny that success is a crime, Elena replied calmly. She opened her briefcase again and pulled out another device. This one was larger than the holographic projector, about the size of a thick book. Several alien representatives moved nervously in their seats. Human technology always made them uncomfortable because it was so different from their own. Where alien devices were complex and beautiful, human tools were simple and functional. May I show the council exactly what humanity has accomplished? Elena asked. More of your propaganda, sneered a Nexarian representative. Facts, Elena corrected. Just facts. High Arbiter Xylex nodded stiffly. Proceed. Elena activated the device. A much larger holographic display appeared, showing a detailed three-dimensional map of human space. Blue dots marked the 47 human colonies, with information scrolling beside each one. Let's start with the charge of aggressive expansion, Elena said. She highlighted one of the blue dots. This is Kepler 442b. Atmospheric pressure 30 times Earth normal. Constant volcanic activity. Radiation levels that would kill most council species in hours. Information appeared beside the planet showing environmental data. The numbers were staggering. Surface temperatures that could melt lead. Radiation levels that would destroy unprotected DNA in minutes. Atmospheric toxins that would kill most life forms instantly. Council records show that the Krell hegemony attempted to establish a military base here, Elena continued. They lost 15,000 soldiers over 3 years before declaring the planet uninhabitable. War Prime Krex's armor plates shifted angrily. That world is a hellscape. No rational species would try to live there. Yet humanity has a colony there, with 3 million inhabitants, Elena said. Growing crops, raising families, building cities. The holographic display showed images of the human colony. Green parks, happy families, children playing in perfectly normal-looking streets. She highlighted another planet, Proxima Centauri C, tidally locked to its star. One side eternal winter, temperatures below -200 degrees. The other side, eternal summer, hot enough to melt copper. No atmosphere. More impossible environmental data appeared. War Prime Krex was quiet now, staring at the numbers. The Zephyrian Empire attempted to build a research station here 200 years ago, Elena continued. They lost 4 expeditions and declared the planet incompatible with intelligent life. High Arbiter Xylex's crystal form flickered nervously. Elena could see that he remembered those failed expeditions. Humanity has a thriving underground city there with 890,000 residents, Elena said. They've built geothermal plants on the hot side and ice mines on the cold side. They're completely self-sufficient. She moved to another planet. Ross 128b, gravity 1.8 times Earth standard, hurricane force winds that never stop, acidic rain that dissolves most metals. The environmental data was even worse than the previous worlds. Elena noticed that many council representatives were staring at the display in disbelief. The Vorthak Collective attempted to establish a crystal growth facility here, Elena said. The acidic atmosphere dissolved their equipment in weeks. They declared the planet hostile to all known life. A Vorthak representative spoke, her musical voice tight with strain. That world destroyed our most advanced crystalline structures. Nothing can survive there. Humanity has a colony there with 1.7 million inhabitants, Elena replied. They've developed acid-resistant materials and wind-powered generators. The colony is actually energy positive now, selling power to nearby systems. She highlighted planet after planet, each one showing the same pattern. Impossible environments, failed alien attempts at colonization, thriving human settlements. This is what the Council calls aggressive expansion, Elena said. Humanity, building homes in places you've written off as uninhabitable death traps. The chamber was very quiet now. Elena could see the alien representatives trying to process what they were seeing. Every human colony was on a world that Council species had declared impossible to settle. Now let's discuss dangerous technology development, Elena continued. She changed the display to show technical specifications. Human terraforming technology, she said. The Council claims it's too fast, too dangerous. Technical diagrams appeared, showing simple machines and processes. Our atmospheric processors are based on modified algae that consume toxic gases and produce oxygen, Elena explained. Our soil regeneration systems use genetically modified bacteria to break down poisons and create fertile ground. Our weather modification systems use orbital mirrors to redirect sunlight. She paused and looked around the chamber. Every piece of this technology is an adaptation of something that already exists in nature. We didn't invent anything new. We just learned how to do what plants and bacteria have been doing for billions of years. A Delphinian representative spoke from his water tank. But you do it so quickly? Natural processes take millions of years. Natural processes don't have intelligence guiding them, Elena replied. We simply speed up what nature does slowly. She highlighted another section of the display. The Council is also concerned about the pace of human technological advancement. Let me show you something interesting. The display changed to show a timeline of human technological development compared to other species. Humans developed faster than light travel in 847 years after achieving spaceflight, Elena said. The Zephyrians took 2,341 years. The Krell took 1,176 years. The Vorthak took 1,134 years. She looked up at the Council. Are we developing technology too fast? Or are you developing it too slowly? War Prime Krex stood up, his massive form trembling with rage. You dare suggest that Council species are inferior? I'm not suggesting anything, Elena said calmly. I'm stating facts. Human technological development is faster than yours. Human expansion succeeds where yours fails. Human colonies thrive in environments that kill your people. She paused and looked around the chamber. The question isn't whether humans are better or worse than you. The question is why you're trying to stop us from being different. High Arbiter Xylex's voice was cold and angry. Your final answer to the charges, Ambassador. Will humanity submit to Council authority or not? Elena closed the holographic display and put the device back in her briefcase. She stood quietly for a moment, looking around the chamber at all the alien faces staring down at her. "High Arbiter Xylex," she said finally. "Members of the Galactic Council, you've asked humanity to submit to your authority, to accept limits on our expansion, to slow our technological development, to stop sharing ideas about freedom and self-government." She picked up her briefcase and notebook. Humanity's answer is no. The chamber exploded in angry shouts. Representatives screamed in a dozen languages. War Prime Krex roared threats. Several species delegates stood up and shook their fists or appendages at Elena. But Elena wasn't finished. "You think this is a negotiation?" she said, her voice somehow carrying over the noise. "You think you can threaten humanity into submission with your fleets and your tribunals?" The shouting died down as aliens strained to hear her words. "You're wrong," Elena said simply. "This isn't a negotiation. It's a notification." High Arbiter Xylex leaned forward, his crystal form blazing with blue light. "Explain yourself, human." Elena smiled. It wasn't a friendly smile. It was the smile of someone who had been waiting her entire life for this moment. "Humanity will continue to expand," she said. "We will continue to develop new technology. We will continue to build colonies where you fear to go. And yes, we will continue to show other species that there are alternatives to your way of doing things." She started walking toward the exit of the chamber. "You can try to stop us, of course. You have fleets surrounding this station. You have weapons that could destroy planets." Elena paused at the edge of the platform and looked back at the council. "But ask yourselves this. If we can turn hell into paradise, what do you think we can do to our enemies?" Elena's words hung in the air like a challenge. The massive chamber was completely silent. 200 of the galaxy's most powerful beings stared at the human ambassador as she calmly walked toward the exit. "Stop," High Arbiter Xylex commanded, his crystal form blazing with blue light. "You cannot simply leave. This tribunal is not finished." Elena paused without turning around. "Yes, it is. We have not given our judgment." War Prime Krex roared, his armor clanking as he stood. Elena turned to face the council one last time. "Your judgment doesn't matter," she said simply, "because you have no authority over humanity." The chamber erupted in angry shouts. Representatives screamed protests in multiple languages. Several aliens stood up from their seats, gesturing angrily at Elena. High Arbiter Xylex called for order, but the noise continued. Elena waited patiently, her briefcase in one hand and her notebook in the other. She looked completely calm, as if she were waiting for a bus instead of facing the combined anger of 14 galactic civilizations. Finally, the shouting died down. High Arbiter Xylex's voice was cold with fury. "You reject the authority of the Galactic Council?" "I reject the illusion of authority," Elena corrected. "Authority comes from consent or from force. Humanity never consented to be ruled by the Council." "And your force?" She looked around the chamber. "Well, we'll see how effective that is against a species that builds cities in hell." War Prime Krex slammed his fist down, cracking his stone armrest. "You threaten this council?" "I threaten no one," Elena replied. "But I will make you a promise. If you attack humanity, you will learn why we succeed where you fail. You will discover what happens when a species that thrives in impossible conditions decides to make things impossible for its enemies." She paused and looked directly at War Prime Krex. "Your people failed to establish a simple base on Kepler 442b because of the radiation and heat. Humans built a city there. Do you really want to find out what humans can do when we're actually trying to hurt someone?" Several alien representatives shifted nervously in their seats. Elena's calm tone made her words even more threatening. A Vorthak representative spoke, her musical voice tight with fear. "You would make war on the entire galaxy?" "We would defend ourselves," Elena said. "The difference is that when humans fight for survival, we don't follow your rules about what's possible and what isn't." She looked around the chamber one more time. "You've built your civilizations by avoiding challenges, by declaring things impossible, by maintaining the status quo for thousands of years. Humans build their civilization by overcoming challenges, by making the impossible routine, by changing things that need to be changed." Elena started walking toward the exit again. "If you want a war with humanity, you'll get one. But it won't be the kind of war you're used to. It won't be fleets meeting in space and firing at each other until someone surrenders. She paused at the chamber doors. It will be humans doing what humans do best, succeeding where you think success is impossible. The massive doors opened with a soft whisper. Elena walked through them without looking back, leaving the Galactic Council in stunned silence. For several minutes, no one spoke. The chamber that had been filled with angry shouts was now quiet enough to hear the soft hum of life support systems. High Arbiter Xylex was the first to break the silence. "Seal the station," he ordered. "No ships leave until we decide how to respond to this insult." War Prime Krek stood up, his massive form casting shadows across the chamber. "My fleets are ready, High Arbiter. Give the order, and we will burn every human world to ash." But a Delphinian representative spoke up from his water tank. "Wait," he said. "Before we act in anger, perhaps we should consider what the human said." "Consider?" War Prime Krex roared. "She threatened this council. She rejected our authority. She pointed out facts," the Delphinian replied quietly. "Facts that we have been trying not to think about." A Nexarian representative joined the conversation. "The human data was accurate. They are expanding more slowly than we did. They are settling worlds we cannot use. Their technology, while rapid, has not harmed any council species. They corrupt our client species," protested a Chiton Collective representative. "Do they?" asked a Verdanian delegate. "Or do our client species see human success and ask why they cannot achieve the same things?" The chamber fell quiet again as the representatives considered this question. High Arbiter Xylex's crystal form flickered with uncertainty. "The human rejection of council authority cannot be tolerated." "Why not?" asked the Delphinian ambassador. "What authority do we actually have over humanity?" "The authority of law," War Prime Krex declared. "What law?" the Delphinian pressed. "Humanity joined galactic civilization voluntarily. They signed trade agreements and diplomatic treaties, but they never signed anything giving the Council the right to limit their expansion or control their technology." High Arbiter Xylex was quiet for a long moment. "The natural order of galactic civilization requires Council oversight of all member species." "Says who?" the Delphinian asked. "Where is that written? When was it decided?" Another uncomfortable silence filled the chamber. The truth was that Council authority had developed over thousands of years through tradition and assumption, not through any formal agreement. A Vorthak representative spoke, her voice soft and musical. "Perhaps the real question is not whether we can force humanity to submit. Perhaps the question is whether we should." "What do you mean?" High Arbiter Xylex asked. "The human said something that disturbs me," the Vorthak replied. "She said that if other species see human success, they will question why they need the Council at all." War Prime Krex growled angrily. "Then we must stop human success." "Can we?" the Vorthak asked. "They build cities on worlds that kill our people. They develop technology faster than we thought possible. They solve problems we declared unsolvable." She paused. "How do we stop a species that succeeds by doing things we cannot do?" The chamber was quiet as the representatives considered this question. A young Nexarian spoke up. "There is another option." All eyes turned to the gas-breathing alien floating in its atmospheric bubble. "Instead of trying to stop humanity," the Nexarian said, "we could try to learn from them." War Prime Krex roared in anger. "Learn from humans? Impossible, is it?" the Nexarian asked. "They offered to share their terraforming technology with any species that wanted it. They've never refused to explain their methods to our scientists. The only thing they won't do is stop advancing." High Arbiter Xylex's crystal form was pulsing rapidly. "You suggest that the Council should cooperate with humanity? I suggest that the Council should recognize reality," the Nexarian replied. "Humanity is not going to submit to our authority. They've made that clear. We can try to destroy them, but—" the alien paused. "I've read the reports on human colonies. I've studied their technology. I don't think we can." War Prime Krex stood up again, his massive form trembling with rage. "The Krell hegemony does not surrender to anyone." "This isn't surrender," the Delphinian ambassador said gently. "This is adaptation. Humans have shown us that the galaxy contains possibilities we never imagined. Perhaps instead of fearing that, we should embrace it." Outside the chamber, Elena Vasquez sat in her quarters at Nexus Station. She could hear the raised voices echoing through the station's corridors as the Council argued. Her aide David sat across from her, nervously checking the latest reports from the human fleet. Ambassador, David said, our ships are still completely outnumbered. If they decide to attack, Elena looked up from her notebook. They won't. How can you be sure? Elena smiled. Because they're smart enough to ask themselves one question. If humans can thrive where we cannot survive, what might humans be capable of when we're actually fighting for our lives? She looked out the window at the massive alien fleet surrounding the station. Thousands of ships from 14 different species, all armed with weapons that could destroy planets. They built those fleets to fight enemies like themselves, Elena said. Enemies who follow the same rules, who think the same way, who accept the same limitations. She closed her notebook. They have no idea how to fight an enemy that refuses to accept that anything is impossible. 3 hours later, High Arbiter Xylex sent a message to Elena's quarters. The message was simple. The charges against humanity have been dismissed. The Galactic Council looks forward to continued cooperation with your species. Elena read the message and smiled. No mention of submission. No demands for oversight. No threats of future action. What do we do now? David asked. Elena stood up and looked out at the alien fleet. Already, ships were beginning to leave their positions around the station. The crisis was over. Now we go home, Elena said, and we continue doing what humans do best. Which is? Elena's smile widened, making the impossible look easy. Within a week, the massive alien fleet had dispersed. The Galactic Council quietly updated its records to note that humanity was independently administered rather than council-supervised. And across the galaxy, other species began to ask quiet questions about why they had always assumed certain things were impossible. Elena Vasquez returned to Earth as a hero, but she knew the real victory wasn't hers. It belonged to every human who had ever looked at something impossible and decided to try it anyway.